Hello students, today we are doing lesson 6.5, slopes of lines. So hopefully this will be pretty easy for you. There's just two basic things that you have to learn about the slope of a line. But I have to go through a lot of things that maybe might start to confuse you, but just remember you really only need to know two things, and I'll keep stressing those two things to you, what you need to learn. But I kind of want to go through some of the backstory, if you will, or what the slope is, and that's where it might start to get confusing, and you might think, well, I need to know this, I need to be listening, and you do need to know it, but it's not part of what you will be tested on and things like that. So let's talk about what the slope of a line is. So slope of a line, and I'm sure many of y'all have heard slope, right? Like in skiing, you have a slope, or if you're on a hill, you have a slope. So that is what a slope is. It's the change. And remember, you're supposed to be writing down these notes. It helps you to write this stuff down. The change in the y values, and we're going to talk a little bit about what this means once we get it written down. The y values of 2 points divided by the change. So both of these have change in the definition, right? And the corresponding x value of those 2 points. Okay, now remember, if you don't have time to write this down, just hit pause and finish it. Okay, so a shorter way to say this is the vertical change. And this is maybe what's confusing to some people, is how many ways you can say this. So the vertical change, which is the rise, divided by the horizontal change. Divided by the horizontal change, which is the run. So I've already done probably 3 different ways to understand slope. The change in y value divided by the change in x value, that's one. The vertical change and the horizontal change, and the rise and the run. So all of those are different ways to say the slope. Okay, so let's get into what slope means. So if I had, let's say, no, let me redo this. If I had this line right here, then to find the slope of that, I'm going to find the vertical change, or the rise, and the horizontal change, or the run. So let me show you what that looks like. Well, I'll just rewrite this out. If my rise was 2, which it was on this grid, right? And my other one was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I should have made it just 6. But we'll go ahead and say 7. Okay, so then this from here to here, so the horizontal change is 7. Then my slope would be 2 over 7. So I would have my vertical change on the top. Vertical change, which is called the rise. So how much it's rising. And then the horizontal change, I'm just going to abbreviate that, on the bottom, which is the run. So how far it's going horizontally here. Okay. And then this would be negative, and we're going to talk about what that negative or positive would be in just a minute when we do an actual problem. Okay, so one more thing before we start doing everything is the formula for slope. So you need to write this down. Formula for slope. And this is what it looks like. It has m equals y2 minus y1 all divided by x2 minus x1. Maybe it would look better if the m was right in the middle. So m equals. Okay, so m is your slope. So remember, this one of the things I told you a minute ago was that slope has so many things that you could call it. And up here we said a whole bunch of things, the change in y value, divide it by the change in x value. Well, now I'm telling you something else. Another thing slope is called is m. Okay, so you'll need to remember that so that when you're doing this formula, you know that m is what slope is. Okay, so this needs to be put a square around it, maybe some stars. This is very important. We're going to be using it later on. But first, so before we get into that formula, first let's talk about how I can find slope like we did right here. Okay, so we're going to do that, but on a graph. So I'm going to go down here, and example 1. I'm going to have quite a few examples today, but y'all are going to be doing a lot of them on your own. Okay, example 1, we want to find the slope of a point that passes through 1, 4, and 2, 2. Notice I didn't write down everything I just said because it would take a long time. So we're going to find the slope, of a point that passes through of a line that passes through those 2 points. So in order to do that, I need to make a graph, right? So I need those points on my graph. So I'm going to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to make this graph kind of tall, okay, because I kind of know what's coming up here that I want to show y'all. Okay, these are both positive points, so I didn't draw any of the negative parts of the graph. So I'm going to write down the numbers on this graph so that I make sure I get them right. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I'm going to plot the points. So I have a point at 1, 4. Actually, I'm going to do this in different color. 1, 4, right there, and one at 2, 2. Okay, and then I'm going to draw my line that goes through those 2 points. So, and I'm going to draw it longer than what it shows on here, okay? And you'll see why in just a minute. Oops. Let's do that again. I want it to be really straight, so I'm trying to get it straightened up. Okay, so here's my line. Remember when we drew lines yesterday, we always labeled them with the equation. Well, we don't have an equation here to label this with, so you don't have to label this. So now I'm going to show you 2 ways to find the slope. Okay, the first one is counting. So to count, so first way to find it is count. Count the rise and then put the run under it. So to count the rise, we're going to use these 2 points that are right here, and I'm going to count from here up to here, okay? So the way I do that, I'm going to do this in a different color, is I start here and I go 1, 2. So my rise is 2 of these squares. Do you see how there's 2 of those squares in there? Hopefully y'all can see that. So if I'm going up this way, I went up 2 squares. So my rise right here is 2. And then your run is going horizontal. So if I'm going from here over, that's only 1 square. So I'm going to have 1 under there. Okay, and then I divide those numbers. So 2 divided by 1 is 2. But I need to decide if it's positive or negative. So sometimes when we do the formula, it's going to tell you whether it's positive or negative without looking at it. But when looking at it, if it's pointing, if from bottom to top is pointing left, then it is negative. Negative slope. Okay, if from the bottom to the top is pointing right, then it's a positive slope. So you need to remember those, because when you're doing the ones with graphs, you have to remember when it's a negative slope and when it's a positive slope. Okay, so if it's pointing left, it's negative, and if it's pointing right, it's positive. So the easy way to remember that is on a number line is all the ones to the right are positive and all the ones to the left are negative. So just remember negative ones point left. So thinking from bottom up. Don't say, oh, this arrow is pointing to the right, because we're not talking about the bottom arrow, we're talking about the top arrow. Okay, so this one, because this line is pointing to the left, it is going to be, sorry, one of my things. This is going to be negative. So my answer is -2. So my slope for this line is -2. So what we did was we count it up and then we count it over. And I forgot to put the 1 here. So you count rise and then you go across and you count your run. Okay, that's the way you do it if you have pictures. And in your homework, you will have some with pictures. Okay, the second way to do this is with the formula. So we wrote down the formula up here, this formula right here, and now we're going to do it down here. So I'm going to rewrite it. It's m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So now let's take these numbers right here are the ones I'm going to use, these points. So this is going to be x1, y1, and this is x2, y2. So my first point is x1, y1, and my second point is x2, y2. So I'm just going to go down here and write these points down here to help me with my formula instead of having to look up there the whole time. Okay, so let's just look at the formula part of this. So remember, this is x1, y1, because that's the first point, and x2, y2, because that's the second point. So now I'm going to take each of those numbers and I'm going to plug it into this formula. So I'm going to have m equals, now what is y2? Here's y2, right? That's the first one I need to know. So I go over here and I find y2. This is y2, which is 2. And then I need to find y1. I'm minusing y1, which is 4. And then that's all over x2, right here, 2, minus x1, which is 1. And now I just solved this. I'm just going to go out to the side. 2 minus 4 is -2, and 2 minus 1 is 1. So I just solved this problem and solved this problem. And now this is my slope, but I need to reduce it, so it's just -2. And that's what my slope equals. Remember, m is slope. So my slope is -2. So both ways, whether I did it on the graph up here, okay, this way, I still got -2. And when I did it with my formula, I still got -2. So you should get the same thing both ways. But on your homework, you will have which way you're supposed to do it. If they're showing you a graph, you're going to just count. And if they give you points, you're going to use your formula. Okay, before we go on to some examples on our own, I want to just show you one thing, and this is kind of the confusing part, but this is different ways for you to see what slope is. So there's 6 that they show you in your book. So I'm going to show you all of those. Slope can be m, okay? It can be y squared minus y1 over x squared minus x1. So that was the formula, right? It can also be vertical change. Oops, vertical change divided by horizontal change. This little thing that I'm writing out is in your book on page 239. In fact, I'll put it right here, page 239, if you want to write it down. It can be rise over run or rise divided by run. It can be called change in y divided by change in x. Notice the y is always on top. because we always do our rise first. And the last one you might see is, oops, what happened there? Is it looks like a triangle Y and a triangle X. So you don't see this one much in your book now, but you might see it. And that little triangle just means the change in Y and the change in X. So see, there's 6 different ways that you can see the slope. Okay, so that's a little table in your book, and it looks confusing because there's lots of different ways, but just stick with me. The only 2 things that you need to know is how to count them, which is this one right here. You know how to count them and which ones are positive and which ones are negative, and the formula. Okay, so those are the 2 things we're going to focus on right now with our examples. In fact, really, we're going to be focusing on the formulas. So example 2, you're going to do this one on your own using the formula. Find the slope of find the slope of a line that passes through 4, 1 and 2, negative 3. So you're going to take the formula, m equals y squared minus y1 divided by x squared minus x1. So remember, these are x1, y1, because that's the first point, and x2, y2. Okay, and you're going to do that formula on your own. Pause the video, do it on your own, and then come back and let's see if you got it right. So go ahead and pause the video now and find that problem out. Okay, now everybody should be back. So I'm going to fill in the numbers for this slope. So I'm going to get negative 3 minus 1 divided by 2 minus 4. So that's the first thing I want you to look at is, did you get your numbers right? So when I'm looking at this, if you did not get these right, look, this is y2 and this is y2. So the y's here, the second one is your y2. And then y1 would be 1, which is right here. So that's why I put negative 3 minus 1. Okay, and then on the bottom, same thing. I have x2, which is here, and x1, which is here. So I did 2 minus 4. Okay, and it's always minus. Make sure you're minusing. Okay, now I'm going to solve this. So negative 3 minus 1. If you're not good at your integers, use your calculator. This is negative 4. And then 2 minus 4 is negative 2. Now I have negative 4 divided by negative 2, and that's going to give me positive 2. So your slope for example 2 is 2. If you got that right, then you got example 2 right. Good job. Okay, let's go on to example 3. Same type of problem. We're going to find the slope for the line. I'm not writing down all of this. I'm just writing find the slope, but it's for the line that passes through 3, 4, and negative 1, 5. So you could actually draw this on a graph and you could count your rise over your run, but I want you to be using the formula right now. You'll practice some of the other kind with your homework. Okay, m equals, remember, you're trying to use this formula. I'm just rewriting it every time because it kind of disappears on me when I move my graph up. So I want you to solve this for slope. If you did something wrong in the last one, pay attention to what you did wrong and fix it in this one. So everybody pause and find your slope. Okay, everybody should be back now. And we have 5 minus 4 over negative 1 minus 3. Okay, before you do anything, make sure that before we see if this is right, see if your numbers were right. Did you put the right numbers in? Remember, you put in the second y and then the first y. These are both y's, right? xy, xy, and we call these 1 because they're the first point, and we call these 2 because they're the second point. And same thing on the bottom part. x2 is the negative 1, and x1 is the 3. Okay, so now I need to solve this. 5 minus 4 is 1, and negative 1 minus 3 is a negative 4. Okay, and you can leave it just like that, but I always prefer that this negative sign either goes out right in front of the fraction or it's more on the top of the fraction because sometimes it gets lost on the bottom. So my answer for my slope is -1/4. Some of y'all might have put into your calculators 1 divided by 4 is 0.25. We do not use it as decimals in algebra. I want you to leave it as a fraction. Okay, that was it for examples 3 and for example 3. Hopefully you got that right. Let's move on to example 4 and 5, and these are a little bit different, and you'll see why in just a minute. So let's look at example 4. And we're going to find the slope of let me erase that. Find the slope for the line that's going through 2, 4 and 7, 4. Okay, so what I want you to do is go ahead and solve that, and we're going to talk about it afterwards. There is a little bit something different with this one, but you'll find out when you do it, and then we'll talk about what was different. So hit pause. Go ahead and do the formula just like up here. I'm just not rewriting it yet. Hit pause and then come back when you're finished. Okay, so hopefully you use the same formula. I'm just rewriting it. You don't have to rewrite it every time. Just write it with your numbers in it. So I have 4 minus 4 divided by 7 minus 2. So 4 minus 4 is 0, and 7 minus 2 is 5. And when I divide 0 divided by 5, I get 0. So my slope on this one is 0. And now I want you to see what it looks like if I graph those 2 points. So here's my graph. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so my graph was 2, 4. Trying to do this fast so it doesn't take up too much time. Okay, so I have 2, 4 is my first point, and 7, 4 is my second point. Okay, so here's my line going through those 2 points. Okay, and now you see what kind of line it is? This is a horizontal line. So what this tells you is anytime you have a horizontal line, your slope is 0. And vice versa. Anytime you have a slope that's 0, it is a horizontal line. Okay, let's go on. I'm going to come back to this. I just want y'all to notice that the horizontal line has a 0 slope. Okay, a line that looks like this is not ever going to have a a slope of 0, right? That's going to be more like a slope of 1. So if it's 0, you're going to have a horizontal line. Now let's do example 5, and then we're going to talk about the difference in example 4 and example 5. So example 5, you're doing the same thing. Find the slope for 3, 4 and 3, -2. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and find the slope for those 2. Okay, now that you found your slope, let's do it together. We have, I'm not even going to write the equation again, the formula. We've already done that 100 times. So I'm just going to do the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So when I do this, I get -6 over 0. Now, some of y'all might have left it like that. Some of y'all might have said, oh, that equals 0, which is not correct. What I want y'all to do now is you should always have a calculator with you in algebra. I want you to put this into your calculator. I want you to put -6, divide it by 0, and tell me what your calculator gives you. Most calculators will give you something like an error. It will say error. It will give you not a number. Okay, and why is that? That's because you cannot divide something by 0. It's not possible. Well, it's possible in later maths. It's much more higher level math, but it's not a simple thing to divide by 0. So we actually call this, when it happens like this, we call it undefined or no slope. So your book will say, sometimes it will say undefined as an answer, and sometimes it will say no slope. But in your homework today, if you have one like this where the 0's on the bottom, it's going to give you an answer of no slope in the back of the book. Okay, so I told you I would show you what the difference between these two were, example 4 and example 5. So let's look at what the graph looks for one of these. Okay, so let's see. I needed this to be just a little bit longer, so let me draw it just a little bit longer. Okay, so 1, 2. Okay, here's my graph. 1, 2, 3, -1, -2. Okay, so let me plot those points that are up there. We have 3, 4. Oops, I did not go quite high enough because that was supposed to be a 4 up here. And 3, -2, which is down here. So my line for those 2 points is right here. And what kind of line is that? It's a vertical line, right? So vertical lines always are called no slope. Okay, so those are the two you need to know. Is a horizontal line has 0 slope and a vertical line has no slope. So let's write that down here. I'm gonna put it in red. A horizontal line is 0 slope, and a vertical line is no slope. So those look like the same because a lot of times you think of no as being the same as 0, but it is not the same thing. 0, so let me tell you how I have kids remember this. A vertical line is very easy to walk on. So if I'm walking along, it's very easy. So it takes 0 effort. So it's easy, right? But what if I had a vertical line and I was trying to walk up that? Well, that makes it really hard to walk up, right? I say you have to be Spider-Man to walk up a vertical line. So this is not possible. No human can walk up a vertical line. Okay, so that's why it's called no slope. So that's an easy way to remember the 0 is 0 effort, is super easy, so it's a horizontal line. But a vertical line is not possible or no slope. So you have to be Spider-Man, right, to walk up a vertical line. And none of us are Spider-Man, unfortunately. Okay, so that's your lesson for today. On your homework, you're going to be doing some where you use the formula, like here. And then you're going to be doing some where you count. So you're talking up and down, and make sure you get your negatives and positives. And one more thing before we leave is when you are doing your homework, okay, you need to be checking in the back of the book. So homework, check back of book with answers. I don't stress that a lot because I just think of y'all as knowing to do that. Check back of book with answers, okay? Because when we're in class, I usually check answers with you and then make sure that you're doing them right. But I do still tell kids, even when we have class, to check your answers in the back of the book. Since we don't meet and we don't check those together and we don't have this talking back and forth where I say, what problems did you have with homework, is y'all need to be making sure that you're checking the back of the book. And if you have a problem wrong, you either go back and figure out what you did wrong on your own, or you try to communicate with me through text or anything else. So you can text me, and your parents have my number, or we can FaceTime if I'm available. Sometimes I'm not available. So just make sure that you're checking the back of the book with the answers after you've done a problem. Don't do all 10 problems and then check the back of the book. Do 1 or 2 problems and then check the back of the book because I don't want you to do all 10 of them wrong and then not be able to come back. That would take a lot more work. But if you do one and you realize what you did wrong, then you can fix it and not do all the other ones wrong. Okay, so that's great. Everybody get the checking your back of the book. And tomorrow, I think instead of doing a lesson, we're going to do a worksheet over this. So make sure that you check your answers so that you know that you're doing it right before the worksheet comes tomorrow. Tomorrow. Okay, thanks. That's all. Bye.